The Santa Claus is a mid-90s Christmas film starring Tim Allen, who must take over the role of Santa when the previous one falls to his death. This is one from our childhood, so let's see if that magic is still there. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter and I'm joined as always by David.
What happens if he falls off the roof?
This is a movie podcast. We work our way through franchises or movie themes, batches of movies by a certain actor, director, whatever. But this is our December season, so we're doing a Christmas trilogy. We're doing the Santa Claus trilogy. So this episode is going to be all about The Santa Claus from 1994.
Which, honestly, that threw me for a loop, finding out that this was made in 94.
Yeah.
I feel like this was I don't know, in my head it was always a late 90s concoction.
Yeah, I thought it was later as well, because I feel like, I want to say I feel like I remember it coming out, but I don't remember it coming out when I was that young. I remember it coming out maybe like in 97, 98 sort of time, but apparently,
I mean, I think it was probably just because of the massive gap until the second one, because the second one was like 2002, so
yeah, and then the third,
that's probably what we all just associated as just like, oh yeah, there's Santa Claus 1 probably came out like 2-3 years before Santa Claus 2.
Yeah, and then the third one's like 2010 or something stupid like that.
Yeah.
Wild. I've never seen the sequels. I've only ever seen the first film. I saw it a bunch when I was very young, but I doubt I've seen it since I was... Like, I might have seen it when I was double digits a little bit, like maybe 11, 12, but I definitely haven't seen it since then.
I saw the first one probably only once or twice when I was young. And then the second one, it's just one of those movies that you seemingly keep on finding on over and over and over again. So that one's burned into my retinas. I've got that one on lock. This one was a little bit of a, oh yeah, that's a thing that happens.
Well, I've never seen the second one, so it'll be surprising, or not surprising, but it'll be interesting to see how our opinions differ on that when you're revisiting it for the millionth time.
I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying I've seen it.
You sound like you're a big fan. I don't know. You've watched that a million times. So, yeah, we'll start spoiler-free, as we typically do. Although I suspect no one's that fussed about spoilers for this family kids Christmas movie starring Tim Allen that... You've probably seen. If you haven't, you probably don't care, but that's okay. This is a very different franchise to Dirty Harry. Wanted to make it clear that we do different types of movies.
Yes.
And next year we're doing a lot of action franchises because there's a lot of new entries in franchises coming out. So we've got a reason to work through certain franchises. So this is something a little bit different. Family comedy, Christmas, festive time, all that stuff. So we'll get into it. So yeah, I think this being 1994 means that it's actually it's a lot earlier on in the Home Improvement run than I think I expected as well. That's the key thing about that. And I looked at the director here, John Pasquin, and I looked him up, and he does a lot of comedy sitcoms and stuff like that. He's not done anything for a few years, but he was doing a lot of TV shows up until he seemed to maybe retire or whatever. But notably, he did 39 episodes of Home Improvement and directed Jungle to Jungle, which is another Tim Allen movie. So it seems like he's just someone who works closely with Tim Allen, and that's why he's got this job.
I mean, it's entirely possible. Hard to say. Well, I know that one of the trivia bits I read was that the role was actually written with Bill Murray in mind, and then Murray passed on it. So I don't know how early on in the process the director came in. But
that's interesting. It's hard not to be disappointed that it could have been Bill Murray and not Tim Allen.
That's right. That being said, I think once Tim Allen takes on the role of Santa Claus, I think he looks the part a lot better than I think I could possibly imagine Bill Murray looking the part.
You give him the white beard and the hair. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean that's 95% of it, but just that spark, just the spark caused by being an ex-felon with a whole lot of drugs in your system.
I wonder if Bill Murray in part passed on it because he'd already done Scrooge, and maybe he felt like, oh, I've already done a Christmas movie. This is maybe too...
The trivia I saw said that he passed due to him not feeling the humor was his style, but whatever that means. One other thing, just to note, is that in mentioning that this is in his home improvement days, there was one single week apparently in 1994 where Tim Allen had this film as #1 at the box office. Home Improvement was the #1 television show or sitcom maybe, and he also had the #1 bestseller on the New York Times list because he wrote a book at that period. So there was a brief week in there where Tim Allen ruled the world.
Tim Allen was having a good 1994, I suppose.
Yep.
That's kind of wild. So yeah, it's just funny because I think, I watched Home Improvement when I was younger. It was on TV a lot, so I saw quite a bit of it. It's not a sitcom that I've ever felt the need to go back, because there's other sitcoms that I watched a lot of episodes of that I liked enough that I went back and watched the entire thing of in order. I went back and watched all of Cheers and all of Frasier. I've never felt the desire to do that with Home Improvement.
Yeah, Home Improvement for me, like, I have just the vagueness in my head of like, he has that TV show and then, the family sitcom stuff. There's only like one or two specific moments from the show that I'm like, oh yeah, that came from Home Improvement.
Yeah, everyone remembers the Wilson with the fence. You never see his face. That's the main thing most people remember. Maybe the Tool Girl, because she was hot.
See, you say that, but you just call her the Tool Girl, so I know she had a name. I have no idea what it was,
what's interesting
but I know she had a name.
is I didn't remember this, or maybe I never knew this, but it was actually originally Pamela Anderson, and then it changed to the one that everyone knows because she stayed till the end of the show.
Fair enough.
I want to say her name is Tiffany?
Got me. No idea.
Maybe Heidi?
It would make sense that it starts with a T.
Yeah.
The only moment from Home Improvement that I definitely remember is, I think it was either the oldest son or Jonathan Taylor Thomas, who it was the drugs episode, the very special episode. And the only reason I remember it is because Tim and his wife sit down at one point and they're just like, I mean, we should punish him, right? And in a very forward thinking, I feel like for the time, the wife was like, well, I mean, we did crazy stuff when we were in college. I was like, wow, they just straight up are admitting to that on like basically just a family show where it's just like, nah, parents did drugs too. I mean, was like, that always struck me as like very strangely forward for the time.
Which is interesting because Home Improvement, out of like all the 90s sitcoms you can watch, is probably one of the ones that's dated the worst, because it even in the 90s, barring the odd moment like that, it was the more set in its ways, like traditional old school sitcom. Tim Allen, like, he's a very known conservative in terms of his politics, and he's and all that. And I've not watched any of his current show, or the show, maybe it's ended now, but it was just on recently. But like, I've heard like and seen snippets of it where his politics are a lot more baked into it, where he'll just straight up make fun of like Democratic politicians and stuff like that, and it'll just be baked into the dialogue. So it's like, now it's like just full on, and I think it get moved to Fox at one point, and it's like, okay, it feels like the home is right for it, sure. But I think there's like, it's more subtle in Home Improvement, but I think if you go back and watch it, you do sort of see how like some of his maybe world views were sort of seeped in there. He didn't have complete creative control, but you can definitely see how some of it's just sort of under the surface a little bit. So, not that this is not really that relevant to this movie. I don't really think this movie has a lot of politics in it. But
no, you say that, but like when it comes down to Home Improvement, you can definitely feel the fact that Home Improvement was going on in this character.
Oh, sure.
Because like, it's just the same thing.
He does the grunt at one point in this, that he always did in the show. Like, obviously, it's maybe just Tim Allen's humor and his delivery.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of like little lines in this that I didn't think were very funny, but they felt like Home Improvement jokes. Just the way he said them, the way he sniped things back at people, or whatever. I
mean, not to get too much into it, but it felt like the entire first half of the movie was just Tim Allen's like stand-up set.
Yeah.
Like all the little one-liners, they barely related to the plot at all, but they were just like, hey, isn't that just so funny because Tim Allen's funny?
The one that stuck out to me is that so in the movie, he's separated from his wife, and obviously he's seen his son at Christmas, and that's a big part of the plot. But his ex-wife's new husband or boyfriend is Judge Reinhold, so he's in the movie, which I completely forgot he was in this. I was like, oh, Judge Reinhold's here, and he's a therapist, he's a psychiatrist, and there's a running thing where Tim Allen keeps saying he's not a doctor, he's a psychiatrist, and I'm like, how is that not even dated by 1994, that opinion? That is so absurd, this running... And I know he's just being petty because he's like jealous or whatever, but It just like nothing about that is amusing. Nothing about it's funny.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't think any of the jokes really felt dated to me so much as they just felt like, again, it just felt like Tim Allen's stand-up. Like, watching it through, it felt like there were probably 7 or 8 different takes because they didn't, like, each time Tim was like trying a different line. The one that stuck out to me was at one point they get into Santa's sleigh and they're going down just a road, and he pulls up next to a guy and asks him, like, oh, if we take this down the I-94, we get back on the freeway, and then they drive away. And I was like, that feels like the kind of thing that wasn't written in the script, but they just did a bunch of different takes of and took the best one.
And this was just a green screen shot, so they just had him in front of a green screen just doing it over and over again, and they could...
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, like, whether or not you're going to be into this in any level, other than maybe the childlike, quality of the Christmas stuff, is probably, do you like Tim Allen's jokes and his delivery of comedy? Now, I'm a big fan of Galaxy Quest, but Galaxy Quest is a little bit different to this and Home Improvement in that I don't really feel like when I'm watching that, it doesn't feel like Tim Allen. I mean, I'm sure he had some power, like, behind the scenes because he is a big enough star, but it doesn't really feel like his comedy. It feels like it's a really strong concept with a really strong script that he just happens to be playing the character in. As opposed to here, it feels like he's doing Tim Allen in a Christmas movie, which, if you like Tim Allen, you'll be down with that. If you don't, whatever. The premise of the film, though, just to sort of get it out of the way before we give our more general thoughts, is... So Tim Allen, he's playing this guy who works at a toy company. Like I say, he's separated from his wife. His son's staying with him over Christmas Eve, and it all goes a little bit wrong, and things don't quite go to plan. But that night when they're asleep, they hear some noises on the roof. Santa Claus is there, and Tim Allen, when he shouts up to him, accidentally makes Santa fall off the roof and die. And because he picks up the suit and puts it on, he effectively takes the job as a new Santa Claus. So we get the story kind of takes place over 2 Christmases, where the first Christmas is kind of him he's still Tim Allen, and he's sort of like begrudgingly just getting like taken by the magic of the sleigh and the sack of toys and stuff. And then over the year, there's kind of like a story of like how he's really becoming proper Santa Claus for next time.
Like if this were done with different music and atmosphere and stuff like that, this would be a fully Kafka tale of a man slowly transforming against his will.
Oh, it could be a complete horror movie if you wanted it to be. Like you absolutely could turn it into that. So yeah, obviously the son's kind of the second main character, and then you've got the Judge Reinhold and the ex-wife as recurring character. Peter Boyle, speaking of sitcom actors, he's quite good in Everybody Loves Raymond, which is not as beloved as a sitcom, but I really like him and the brother on that show. I think they're really funny. So he's in there in a small role. Is there anyone else in here that's notable?
I mean, notable in terms of name, possibly, but honestly, no roles are big outside those main 4, and then the head elf character.
Oh yeah, the head elf. That actor, he was on The Deuce on HBO in the last few years, so he's done okay still. Because obviously he's a teenager in this, but yeah. So that's the basic premise. So I guess I'll ask the question. David, what do you make of the Santa Claus? Actually, one little tidbit that's just in general before I do let you answer that is that this movie is responsible for me like misspelling Santa Claus for decades, because it wasn't until the last couple of years that I realized that Claus doesn't actually have an E at the end of it when you're saying Santa Claus. But because this movie's making the pun, it's the Santa Claus, it has the E at the end, and
it's like the Beatles, how the bug is EET,
yes,
and the band is EAT, and it just messes up everybody.
Yes, so I was spelling Santa Claus wrong. Anytime I had a reason to spell it, I was doing it wrong for years and years, and then realized, it's not spelled like a clause in a contract, it's spelled without the E. Anyway, I thought I would have remembered it. David, what do you make of the movie?
Okay, so humor-wise, I think that, it feels a little bit of the time. It feels like the sort of thing of, you're watching Home Improvement, and you're like, oh, hey, Tim Allen's in a movie? Let's go watch that this Christmas. And then it's just the same. However, a lot of time and a lot of focus in the movie is given to Charlie, which is Scott Calvin, Tim Allen's character's son. And it's just played so innocently, and it's played so just genuinely the whole way through that I honestly can't fault this movie for just, like you said, that childlike wonder of Christmas sort of feeling. So, did I enjoy this movie? In the whole, I'd say yes. I think that this is maybe not a quintessential Christmas movie, but it is definitely one that if it gets put on or if it's in the rotation of like a family tradition, I fully get it.
Yeah. And I think we were at the age where we were kids growing up in the 90s, so, we naturally might have an attachment to this. I don't think I ever did as much as I did to say, like Home Alone was the main movie. That was the one that was like the Christmas movie. And then I was a weird kid, so it was Die Hard was the next one. But like there's a whole selection of Christmas movies that are more kid focused, and I think this one was always kind of in the middle tier where I definitely watched it. It was a Christmas movie that came out in my childhood, so I definitely watched it. But it wasn't as strong meant as much to me as some of the other ones. Watching it now, it's kind of a weird mixture of feelings, because I kind of agree that it's very genuine. It plays it very earnestly, arguably to a fault, because there's a lot of things that don't make sense in this world if Santa does exist. Like,
absolutely. This is the movie that you can easily point to anytime you have that criticism of like, if Santa really exists, why don't the parents believe in it? Because somebody has to be leaving the presents.
Yes, like where do they think these presents are coming? Like, did they magically just think they bought them? Like, does Santa just warp their minds to think, oh, we bought those presents for the kids? Oh well.
Yeah, the logic of this movie is absolutely not sound. That being said, there's an entire scene, maybe about a third of the way through the movie, that just straight up like pokes at that. They say like, oh, hey, this doesn't make any sense, and the kid's like, so what? Who cares?
Yeah. Which is kind of funny in a weird way, because like I feel like this movie's like, screw it, just enjoy it, and get into the Christmas spirit and have fun with it, which is fine. But it's kind of weird that there's so much talk in this movie about like the adults not believing in Santa, and when did you like first like realize or like stop believing in him, that I'm like, you can't really show this to a super young kid because they're not ready to hear these conversations. This will muddy the waters for them, kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, you say that, but at the same point, by the end of it, it earnestly comes out. It's like, no, all the adults are wrong. Like, it's
true. Yeah.
It only muddies it if you only watch like the first act. As soon as it gets past that, it's like, yeah, no, he's real.
I was around it because there's a point later on, I think it's actually near the end of Act 2, where Judge Reinhold and the ex-wife are like talking about when they stop believing. And it was that conversation, like, this is like funnily enough, Judge Reinhold was also in Gremlins, which is the movie I'm about to reference. But, Gremlins has that famous speech where Phoebe Case is like, this is how I learned Santa wasn't real. And it's this horrific story of her father dying in the chimney.
Somehow I knew that would be brought up here.
Yeah. So, but yeah, funnily enough. And then not only that connection, but Judge Reinhold and Phoebe Cates were like a thing for at least some time, I think.
Okay.
Or they were released in the other famous movie together, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But anyway, regardless, like, it was when they were having that conversation where I was thinking, yeah, you could, like, I feel like this is a weird thing where this is a perfect movie aimed at kids who are maybe growing out of Santa, but this movie's saying it's okay to still like have fun and like, accept the magic of it, even though deep down it's not really real. Just go with it.
And by the way, to any kids watching this, why? And then second off, Santa's real. Peter, he was naughty and he got cold.
Yes. I'm pretty sure there's no kids watching. I mean, as the Santa Claus, maybe some kids have stumbled onto this particular episode. So, yeah, I mean, the comedy though, I do find it kind of weird. Like, I have to assume that if I tried to watch Home Improvement now, I probably wouldn't enjoy it that much. And I think part of it's because Tim Allen kind of has this attitude when he's like making fun of someone that he doesn't like. They just is kind of unlikable to me.
I mean, you say that, but I thought that half the lines coming out of those were just very witty banter. Like, I not all of them landed, obviously, but I think that most of them enough, where it was also a line of Judge Reinhold, he plays the character of Neil, and that is the stepfather-esque character. Because of what we know as the audience of Santa Claus is real and Charlie is stating the truth, he comes off as just the worst sort of like gaslighting character, where he's like, no, you're wrong, Charlie. None of that was real. Like, I don't think he's supposed to be likable really throughout the whole movie.
Which is kind of weird because in the real world, he's right.
Unless you're a kid, in which case he's wrong.
But I mean, like the whole like when he's like thinking Tim Allen needs like professional help and he gives him his card and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, in the real world, this guy would be seen as delusional and he would need professional help. Like,
yeah, absolutely. But it's because of us knowing as the audience. I feel like it's kind of Tim Allen's little wink and a nod to be like, yeah, isn't this guy? See, you're not supposed to like him.
Yeah. It's just like a vibe Tim Allen gives. Whenever Tim Allen gets to just be Tim Allen, I think that's something that like I've as I've grown up, I think I've like realized I don't like it that much, and I don't really.
Yeah, well, I mean, as much as I'm saying that, there's a scene in this movie where he's delivering gifts to like a little girl.
Yes.
And she wakes up, and he immediately is just like snapping at her, like the entire way through, and that's unlikable. Like, yeah, that sort of humor. It's very dry, very. I don't want to say angry, but very much kind of just like fed up with the situation and taking it out on people around him.
Which is not to say that I don't like dry humor or characters who are unlikable, but there's something about Tim Allen that feels like, as opposed to say someone like Larry David, who is often very a disgruntled character in his show, being mad at the world. Is there something? There's some sort of, again, it goes back to that word earnest. There's something earnest about the way Larry David does it, and I'm just using him as a comparison because he's the first one that I thought of. Or even if you compare it to characters from his show Seinfeld, or even like It's Always Sunny, where, okay, these people are awful, but it kind of feels like there's a point being made with the jokes, where with Tim Allen, it kind of feels like, oh, he's just a guy who's making fun of things he doesn't like, and there's not necessarily because there's a belief behind it, it's just he doesn't like these things, so he's going to make fun of it. So it feels a bit more... I don't know. I would say pay. That must be a bit harsh, but
I mean, I get what you're saying. Yeah. It's hard to put a label on exactly where it lies.
I guess it all just kind of comes down to his delivery of it. It's just slightly left of like where it would work for me. So the calories a little bit off, but it's kind of weird because obviously I'm remembering certain bits as I'm watching them, so there's like a little bit of nostalgia here or there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, also when it comes down to the comedy, I think that there is a very clear line of delineation here between everything up to when he gets back home after Christmas Eve, and then the whole like transformation sequence, because everything before that point is very, again, the same sort of delivery. It's a bit like angry, a bit petty, whatever word you want to use. But then as soon as that moment hits, it is all the comedy is physical, all the comedy is visual. None of it is really in the line delivery as much as it is just him doing something goofy.
And to be fair to it and play devil's advocate, I would say that the first chunk of the movie, if he's a bit unlikable, that's arguably a very intentional thing, because the whole arc is that he's going to be better by the end. He's going to have like given into the magic of Christmas and all the rest of it, which is fine. But there's kind of like a weird irony to it that we're saying he's just being Tim Allen, and then the arc of the film is that he learns not to be Tim Allen.
I mean, it's not wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I guess actually to bring Bill Murray back into it, I said that with Bill Murray. To bring Bill Murray back into it, if you look at Scrooge, he's obviously playing he's playing Scrooge, right? He's literally a dickhead to start off with. And I think Bill Murray has that thing where he can be a complete, like, sarcastic prick, but he's never unlikable to watch. You know?
Oh, yeah.
And that goes for, his character in Ghostbusters. I mean, it even goes back to what you said about how, it not being his style of humor. Maybe that's what it was. But I could see Bill Murray in this role because I could see him being that asshole dad to start with and growing more of a heart as the movie goes on. So I guess I'm just making a dig at Tim Allen here that he's just being himself, and that's the negative character.
Yeah, I mean, there is a little je ne sais quoi. There is a little something that you can't quite put your finger on that each actor does differently. Like, it would essentially just be the same character arc as Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, where, he slowly learns the value of all of whatever. But
of Groundhog Day.
Yeah, but it is it is a thing where there's something to Bill Murray's character just as a person that he brings to a role that Tim Allen has differently. Not worse, because it's just different.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of... So, yes, I'm just trying to sum up how I feel about the movie. Honestly, it's just kind of conflicting, and I feel like my rating's going to fall somewhere in a sort of middling territory by the end, just because I'm conflicted about everything. I feel like that feeling's going to go away, because I imagine the sequel's decline in quality, but...
I mean, I won't say yes. But that's no but.
No but.
You got a week to wait. That's it.
I would say yes. Okay. All right. So yeah, as far as anything else, obviously, there's not a lot of visual effects. There's a few dodgy ones when the sleigh takes off, for example.
Yeah, strangely, I feel like the sleigh was the worst visual effect out of them. Like, all it would take really is green screening, but I suppose they actually probably went and did CGI with it, didn't they?
Yeah, they also did a bit of CGI. Yeah, the other stuff all seems to work out well enough. It never felt like when he's getting fat and stuff like that. It never feels like, oh, it's a guy in a fat suit. I did a decent job. It looked good enough. Never really had a problem with any of that stuff. Obviously, you've got some different Christmas songs in the soundtrack. Not all the hits, but some of the notable ones are in there. So, yeah, I the rest of the cast are all solid enough and give it a nice enough quality, I would say. But I think the biggest thing about this is that there's another version of this plot that I remember liking more. I'm not going to put my neck on the line and say it's definitely better. But I will say, when we eventually do the Ernest franchise, Ernest Saves Christmas is also about the transition from one Santa to the new Santa, and I remember liking that a bit more as a kid.
Fair enough.
I'm just gonna say it. Just gonna put it out there. And maybe it's because Ernest as a character just lends himself to the earnestness of Christmas.
I mean, I personally have only ever been exposed to, I think the Halloween Ernest one.
Scared Stupid. One? Yeah.
Yes. That's the only one I've ever seen. So.
Fair enough. Well, one day we'll go through all like 8 of those.
Oh boy.
There's something like that. So it's around 8 or 9. So yeah, that'll be a wild ride when we get there. But yeah. So I guess we'll just give the spoiler warning so we can start talking about all the bits and bobs of the film. Obviously, it's easy kind of to tackle in sections because you have these kind of neat things. You've got basically everything before Santa's on the roof, which is the setup of the character and the family and all that stuff. And there's some proper world building here. Basically, the kid doesn't want to be with his dad. He's like, "No, take me home, Mom. I don't want to be here."
Yep.
And Tim Allen's late home and he's lying about the traffic. He was at the Christmas party at work, and he's like, there's like a 3-car pellet. I mean, you just see the road and it's empty. Like he's just he's just skirting on home. He burns the turkey because he tries to do Christmas dinner. Which is this? Do Americans have Christmas dinner on Christmas Eve? Is this a normal thing?
It's per family. I mean, I personally, I have a dinner, but it's not a full like turkey dinner. But
yeah, the turkey dinner traditionally, at least my experience with everyone I know in the UK, is that it's a Christmas Day thing. It's not Christmas Eve you do that. But
I mean, I don't have that. I don't have turkey on Christmas, but maybe I'm the weird one.
I mean, I haven't done it in a long time either, but like, but in a family scenario where you're doing the tradition, it would be Christmas Day here, at least for anyone I've ever met here anyway.
Yeah, I mean, going over to other movies, you got like, A Christmas Story and stuff like that, where the dogs came in and took the Christmas turkey. So clearly it is a thing of some families do it.
I think
enough to be a trope.
Christmas Vacation, I'm pretty sure, is Christmas Eve as well. When they have their big dinner with the family.
Yeah, so it's at least something to be a trope, whether or not it's actually there.
Yeah, that's just a thought. There is actually a subtle joke here that I kind of appreciated. So he ruins dinner, so he takes Charlie out looking for an open restaurant on Christmas Eve. And I was actually really questioning what time it was supposed to be at this point, because he's coming home from work and there's like no traffic, which implies, it's much later than rush hour. And then he spends hours burning a turkey, and then they go out looking for a restaurant. I'm like, like, not only is it Christmas Eve, I feel like it has to be like midnight by now or something. You know,
it's got to be close.
Yeah. But they find a Denny's that's open. I've never had the pleasure. I don't.
That's the wrong word to associate with the Denny's.
Well, they got some product placement. They got to be this safe haven on Christmas Eve. But the subtle joke that I did kind of like here, I almost like thought they went too far by like having him wave at one of the guys. But I liked the subtle joke that every single other than like the Japanese like company that had like a business thing in the other room, when it gets taken into the other area, which is just the random customers, every single one is a single dad with their kids. And I thought that was a nice little joke. I was like, oh, okay, this is all these dads that have either maybe tried or just like didn't even attempt Christmas dinner and have just brought their kids to Daddy's. Okay, that's a nice little joke. Like,
yeah, this movie has a lot of those tiny little things where you got to like think about it for just a second to be able to be like, oh, okay, I get it. I kind of wish there's parts later on once he kills Santa that they over-explain.
Yeah,
they sit there and they're just like, see, get it? We're being clever. And it's like, okay, yeah, just back it up a bit.
Yeah. So that's basically, he reads him a bedtime story, and but they hear noise on the roof, and
I do want to point out, there's a whole conversation at the beginning of Neil basically told Charlie how there is no Santa, and Scott was just like, why not let him enjoy being a kid for a little bit? And then by the time that he's putting Charlie to bed, Charlie just straight up asks him, like, do you believe in Santa, Dad? And Scott's like, yes, go to bed now. And then that kind of gets undone over the course of the next couple scenes, but it always toes the line where Scott is trying to just allow his kid to have, magic in his childhood.
It's the likable quality, because obviously the arc part of this is that he's kind of constantly lying to him, even though he's doing it for a reasonably good reason. But because when he's actually confronted with the reality of this being Santa, he doesn't believe it, obviously, and he's constantly looking for the rational explanation. There's a little plug for the Disney Channel. Which I
noticed that too. I was like, wow, okay.
I have to imagine the Disney Channel was a relatively new thing in 1994, so it felt like a little bit of a, hey, we'll promote our thing in our movie. In a year's time, this movie will premiere on the Disney Channel. Look forward to it.
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah, so I guess the whole thing where he's sort of fighting for his son to still believe in Santa, even though he's really cynical and he works for a toy. Like I almost like thought they were going to go into this a bit more. The idea that he works for a toy company who actually is the commercial part of Christmas, and he's so it's kind of there where he's part of the corporate side of it, but it never really does that much with it. In fact, the company's barely brought up. Like, he has like one scene where he goes later, but that's about it.
It feels like there's a different draft of the script floating around out there where this is a much bigger part, and by the time they did a couple rewrites, it just got shrunk down to what it is now.
Yeah.
Because it is essentially the opening holiday party, the part where he comes in for, like, show and tell, I guess you want to call it, whatever it is, and explains what his job is, and then the part where he is put on indefinite leave, and that's really all it has to do with it.
Yeah. Because I could see like half the movie being about like how his work life is tanking because of what's happening to him, and other people thinking he's crazy and so on, but it's barely there. It's such a small factor of it, which is funny.
I do wonder if the runtime of this movie was trimmed down significantly at some point.
Oh,
like
maybe.
If it was, because it is just barely, it's an hour 37. Like, it's just barely over the limit, and I wonder if maybe there was a longer edition where, he did fully quit his job at one point or stuff like that. I don't know.
And not just because, like, I can see a lot of, like, potential gags of him being at work and all the different things that may happen because of his transformation, but just for the arc of, like, going from the corporate side to the magical side of Christmas, where it's, it goes from this cynical thing to a genuine, heartfelt thing for the character, and it's not really there because they barely bring it up.
Yeah, in fairness, the scene you're talking about is literally just, like, half of one scene. where someone else is making a pitch for the commercial toy, and he's like, no, we need something small that gets kids' imaginations running.
Yeah,
and they're like, Mr. Calvin, the door is that way.
I hate to compare it to Scrooged again, but this is actually kind of if you remember the opening of Bill Murray's Scrooged, it's like this commercial for their Christmas, like, because he runs a TV network, right? He's like the head of a TV network, and it's this commercial for their Christmas like programming or whatever, and it's this thing with like a soldier and there's gunfire and it's like extreme Christmas, and it's like this super cynical commercialized violence like fueled thing, and the other characters are too scared to tell Bill Murray, isn't this a little bit against the spirit of Christmas? I feel like this is kind of like a really pared down version of that, where the guy it's as much as it's Santa in a tank, it's still like pretty cartoony looking, and it's still just like a little, we're just trying to sell our toy tank, so we've got Santa in the tank, and Tim Allen's doing the no, you would never ride a tank, you would take the sleigh. It kind of feels like a less interesting version of that scene in Scrooged.
Yeah, that's fair. It is one thing with this movie, when he starts going through the transformation of becoming Santa, he gets fatter, he grows a beard, his hair goes white, everything like that. That's the gist of it. But then there's also the, I guess you want to call it metaphysical things, where like kids are just drawn to him and like giving up their wish lists and whatnot. And at one point, a whole bunch of reindeer is just following him out of like a park. The one thing that I really wish would have been explored more, because again, it really only ever happens over the course of that one scene, is like all of a sudden he's all in on sweets and he believes in like the magic of Christmas, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of a flip where, like, I get what they're kind of going for, where he's challenged by something and he immediately wants to defend what Christmas is, and that's kind of like, but it's not like he even realizes in the moment he's defending it and goes, oh, like, why do I care about this? Like, a moment like that would have been good. He also orders, like, they're ordering lunch for this meeting because they're just going to work through lunch, and he orders like 3 desserts and like a bunch of extra food and stuff, and they're all looking at him like, dude, like, you put on, because this is him coming back after the Christmas break. He's maybe been away for 2 weeks or something, and he's like gained this enormous amount of weight for that time period.
He has to wear like sweatshirt in order to get in.
Yeah, because none of his clothes fit anymore, and he comes in and they're like shocked, and it's not so much that they're being dicks because he's put on weight. It's like, it shouldn't physically be possible for you to put that much weight on in the amount of time it's been since we last saw you, which is why they're all like just in like, their jaws are on the floor and they don't know what to say to him. It feels like this is like really early on in the transformation, once he's like started going through that, and it feels like he's already kind of there, which to the point where, because when he first wakes up, right, because he goes to bed in the North Pole after he spent his first night out for Christmas Eve, and he wakes up in his own bed and he's got his pajamas on still, and he doesn't think any of it's real, but obviously Charlie does. Charlie's like, he was with him the whole time. He's like, we went to the North Pole, we did all this. And he's telling his mom and his stepdad, and he's like, no, it was just a dream. I must have told him about it. As like, because of how much he's resisting this, it's kind of weird that the movie doesn't have more of like a transition or realization where he goes from being adamant it didn't happen, where he then starts defending Christmas and all that stuff, and then he's pretty much like, like when he talks to Charlie, when he, like the mom, like, you need to talk to him and tell him this stuff isn't real. Instead of telling him it's not real, he says, oh no, it's a secret. We should keep it to ourselves because no one will understand.
Yeah, I feel like it was trying to balance a thing of, he doesn't want to, like we said, he wants to keep Charlie's imagination and childlike wonder alive. He doesn't want to just shut it down. So him telling him none of that happened, you're making it up, it was all just a dream, like, that's going to shut that down immediately. He wants to try to keep that. And I also think it is half of, he doesn't know how to explain it either.
Yeah.
Because for the entire first part, when he's just waking up, he's like, that must have been a dream. But then it's like, okay, how did you get the pajamas? He's like, so it was a dream though, right? Like, he doesn't have any sort of good explanations as towards how anything happened.
Yeah.
So by the time it comes down to him explaining to his son, like, look, I can't tell you specifically, don't believe in it, but maybe just like, stop going so over the top with it.
I think what they're going for in that scene is that he is willing to tell him it's not real, and he knows that's what he should do, but he just gets the feeling that, but it might be real. So, exactly. I can't deny it. So I have to just sort of pivot and say, no, keep it a secret. Because this is like after he takes his dad to, take your dad to school and like, what does your dad do for work kind of day. Who's
your daddy and what does he do?
Who's your daddy and what does he do? Which is kind of weird that he's not been, because this is before though, because he doesn't go back to work until he's put on weight.
Right.
Unless that's not him coming back after the holidays and he's just like
he's just been off.
Yeah, or it's just like, is this just after a weekend? Like he left on the Friday in like February and he came back on the Monday and oh shit, you've put on all this weight.
Yeah, I mean it's possible. He did say he gained like 45 pounds in a week, so
yeah,
it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Of which, he sees the doctor and the doctor's just cracking all these jokes and, maybe cut down on the sweets, things like that. And his heartbeat is beaten to the jingle bells, yeah. Yep. So that's the whole thing. Yeah, we kind of glossed, actually, we kind of skipped ahead because we were talking about the transformation. We kind of need to talk about the actual first night, the Christmas
fair enough.
Where he kills Santa and...
See, that's the thing, is that the transformation is such like, I don't know, I don't want to say majority of the movie, but it's such the focus, I feel like, that first night honestly just kind of fell by the wayside by the time you get halfway into the movie.
Yeah, but I mean, I think he wakes up in his bed around the 35-minute mark, so I mean, so it's a good third of the movie is that that first chunk, which is...
I guess it's more so that the first night doesn't feel plot relevant. Like, the only part that matters is the previous Santa died and he put on the suit. He could have immediately fallen asleep again at that point, and the rest of the plot could have continued on.
Yeah. All they would really do is say, "Oh, the last Christmas, like a lot of kids didn't get toys, so the stakes are really high this year to reignite the magic of Christmas." Instead, it's more like the sack of toys and the reindeer just kind of force them into it by dragging them into the houses.
I feel like they knew that when they got to the second Christmas of like him actually, the third act wrapping everything up, they didn't want to take the time to do the cute little explanations of like, oh, here's how Santa goes to kids who don't have chimneys. It's like, no, we got to do the first Christmas so that we can get all of our cute little explanations out of the way so that the second Christmas is freed up for the plot. Yeah.
So we get, like him being sucked down the chimney, you get sort of like a warping effect where he kind of just goes to the right size to fit in it. And if there's no chimney, he'll go into the heat pipe.
The radiator.
Yeah. And the radiator will turn into a fireplace magically before he lands, so that he's got something to come out of. And I just
and there's the magic bag which raises him up and down, like physically lifts him in the air. And the bag, I feel like, specifically only gives him the toys that are meant for the children of the house he's in.
Because it's empty after the first house, then it refills for just the second house, and so on and so on. So it's setting all this up. I actually kind of love though, because later when Judge Reinhold's trying to like talk Charlie out of like believing all this shit, and he's like sort of doing all the logical things, like, oh, so Santa can never get all over the world in one night, and the kid hits him with like, I think there's something with the time continuum that kind of it gives him this really like complex like physics answer. I started laughing a little bit. That was a good. And Judge Reinhold's like, I'm a psychiatrist. I can't argue with that.
It's not my field. I do. While we're on that scene, though, briefly, it has my favorite line in the movie or explanation, I should say, of Neil points out like, well, like, have you ever seen a reindeer fly? And Charlie just bites back with like, have you ever seen $1 million? And he's like, no. It's like, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And he just sits there like, damn, this kid's good.
Just that's the God defense. That's the just because you can't see something. I
mean, to be fair, is there really that much of a difference between Santa Claus and God in most things?
No, actually, as an atheist, I think they're equal. I think they're exactly equal.
They're both omnipotent. They're both all-seeing, all-knowing.
Well, not so much that.
Both are judgmental.
As an atheist, and I'm pointing that out just to make it clear where I'm standing on this.
Yeah.
There's nothing more ridiculous to me about saying Santa Claus exists than saying God exists. They're equal.
I will point out, you're definitely gonna love the next movie because trying not to spoil too much, but we get the whole mythological crew
Ah, okay, interesting.
If one of them exists, all of them exist.
So, that for me lines up just nicely, I suppose. But, I did, I got a kick out of that response. But we see the North Pole. We see like all the elves who are actually all kids. Well, I mean, they're not, they say they're hundreds of years old, but they're all
they're
kid actors.
Portrayed by kids.
Yes. There's a couple of weird moments in here where like this was supposed to be funny, obviously, but where I think it's Judy, which happens to be the same name as the waitress, so they can do a little thing. But so there's a little
exactly
moment
what you're gonna say,
where she says, "Oh, I'm like 1400 years old," or whatever the number is, and he just sort of like jokingly goes, "You look good for your age," and she goes, "Thanks, but I'm seeing someone in wrapping," and I'm like, "What was this joke?"
Yeah, it's a little unsettling because they are definitely like 9-year-olds.
Yeah, and I mean, there's nothing problematic with the reaction. Obviously, Tim Allen just sort of makes a face and is like, "Yeah, that wasn't what." It just gets up.
Yeah,
but
it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, but it's just like I don't know. I don't know if I like that joke.
Yeah, I think that it's probably one of those things that, like, I don't want to say with time because that just puts early 1990s in a really weird light, but I think it is just one of those things that became less okay.
I think the thing is, though, is the joke is fairly innocent. Like, I'm not even want to critique it that much because the joke is obviously her misunderstanding of what you just said, and it's supposed to be funny because you've got a kid assuming he was trying to hit on her. But it's just,
all the elves are snarky as hell.
Oh yeah,
every single one of them is just fully able to keep up with anything that Scott Calvin throws out at them.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it just raises too many the type of subject it's kind of broaching with the joke is just something most of us don't want to hear about.
Like, I can fully I fully expect somewhere on YouTube there's like a meme mashup where it's that scene happens and then that meme of like the FBI raiding the house
yes
is immediately afterwards. That's the sort of thing where it's like, don't take it too seriously, but yeah, we all can like say probably not okay.
Yeah, I'm glad that we don't need to do that joke anymore. That's all I'll say. But yeah, so that stuck out to me. But yeah, so I mean that's basically like there's obviously a lot of little jokes in this first like chunk of the movie. You mentioned when he's flying the reindeer and talks about the highway and whatever, and just him being mean to the little girl. It's like, go back to sleep, you're not getting any presents and things like that.
I will say that when they're up at the North Pole is when we get the official explanation to the Santa Claus, which is when Santa fell off the roof, he had a business card on him that basically says like, put on the suit and the reindeer will know how to handle the rest. But apparently on itty bitty tiny font all around the border of the card is the legally binding contract legalese of, if you put on the suit and get in the sleigh, then you become Santa.
My problem, this is not a critique of the movie per se, it's just a critique of like their bullshit is that the statement on the card was not a question. It wasn't like it wasn't like, if you choose to put on the Santa, the big text said, put, as if it was an emergency, put on the Santa outfit and the reindeer will take care of the rest, as if no, this is an emergency, Santa's just died, you have to do this. And then the small print,
in fairness, it kind of is.
Yeah, and then the small print is, no, if you do this, that's you're locked in, you're Santa Claus now until you die, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and say that the North Pole is under different legal jurisdictions than the rest of the world, and they're able to just get away with this by ancient blood magic or something.
It's a bit of a dick move for what's meant to be the happiest place on earth and all that shit. It's a bit of a dick move.
I mean, I don't know. They never go into like how this Santa came to be or any previous Santas or anything like that. At least not yet. I can't imagine that anybody actually then really chose to do it. Like, it always was a thing of they were just kind of put into the situation.
Yeah.
Unless a Santa died of old age, but
I was like, can I just say, like, you see them making presents, and we see obviously some of the toys and stuff that Santa puts out under the tree.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this is like a rights thing and whatnot, but like, whenever I watch a movie like this, I'm always like, the toys Santa brings are the shittiest, most these are the generic cheap toys that your grandparents might get you on a whim, and you're like, oh, thanks. Like, this generic truck. How great. And I'm like, no, that's not what I wanted as a kid. Is it why I wanted Power Rangers, I wanted Turtles, I wanted Batman stuff. Like,
it's also the Halloween costume issue where
yes,
you know, every kid dresses up as whatever Pokemon or whatever, but you watch any movies, there's a witch, there's a pirate, there's a skeleton, and that is all you will get, good sir.
Yeah, except for there's one licensed toy in this, I think. It's right at the very end when the ex-wife gets the thing she wanted as a kid, and it's like an actual licensed board game or whatever. And I was like, they paid for that one. And
the Oscar Mayer weenie whistle.
Oh, is that a licensed thing? I'd never heard of it.
It belongs to Oscar Mayer Wieners.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
You've never heard of Oscar Mayer Wieners?
No.
Is that an... Okay. I thought that was a worldwide brand. That's my bad.
That's
My Baloney has a first name. It's Oscar. My Baloney has a second name. It's Meyer. None of this?
Are you having a stroke? What's happening?
Okay, I guess so. I mean, okay, no, seriously, comments. Back me up on this, because I swear.
It says something that I recognize what a Denny's is, even though there's no Denny's like in the UK, but I've never heard of this stupid whistle thing, or this guy that it comes from, apparently.
It's just a brand of bologna. Like, it's a deli meat corporation, that's all. And they came out with good enough branding that you got a weenie whistle. I don't know what to say.
What, a deli? What deli meat? What?
I don't know how to explain it any better. It's just something that exists.
What? That's like you know, like Heinz suddenly saying, you know what, we're known for making ketchup and other sauces, maybe some soups and things like that, but you know, I think that, you know, we're going to branch out. We're going to release a new mobile phone.
All right. I'm just going to throw this out here, and if you don't know it, then we can move on.
Okay.
Do you know about the Wienermobile? We can move on.
I mean, there were stories about a guy who might take kids when I was younger.
Which is why I don't want to elaborate. This is... All right, so what happens next in this movie? So, all right, there's one point in this movie. So a lot of the transformation stuff has happened, and we get to a soccer game, and all the kids are now lining up to talk to Scott because he is effectively fully Santa now.
He's got the beard, he's got the hair, he's
wearing a red coat. A red tracksuit. Yeah.
It's the Power Rangers logic. He has to wear his colors now all the time.
Absolutely. Apparently, another trivia I saw was that right up until the transformation happened, he was always wearing black Converse, but then somewhere in the transformation he started wearing red Converse, just to make that little change. But yeah. So anyway, Neil and Laura come up and are just like, oh, dear Lord, we haven't seen you in like 6 months and you've gone full Santa. Clearly, you are damaging our child. So they go and basically take away Scott's custody rights over Charlie.
Yeah, and also it's worth mentioning on this scene, not only are random kids coming up to him and saying what they want for Christmas, they're sitting on his lap, which also feels like something. If I was a parent and I looked over and my kid had wandered over and sat in some stranger's lap, regardless of whether or not he looks like Santa, if it's July, I'm like,
especially if it's July.
Why is there some random creep holding my child? I would be distressed at this. I think it feels weird to like critique the logic in the movie because it's obviously just poking fun at itself all the time. Yeah. It's obviously not trying to be like realistic or anything like that. But I will say the level of acceleration to get to the point where they think, oh, Scott's having a mental breakdown and he's damaging the psychology of your child because he happens to have gained some weight and has a beard. You know, it's a bit of a leap, you know?
I mean, it was a thing where when they came back from the North Pole, apparently Charlie spent like a good couple weeks to a month, like just locked up in his room, like portraying the night over and over again. Like he was acting like he was on a sleigh and whatnot. I can understand their concern, especially if they had just told him that Santa wasn't real. Like this seems like an extreme whiplash back in the other direction. But to get to the point where it's like, no, you are feeding into our son's mental illness and you're making everything worse, therefore you're not allowed to see your son again. That does seem a little bit extreme, especially because it seems like it happened all over the course of like a week where they came to that level of seeing him be Santa to taking away the custody rights, or at least starting that process.
Yeah, and honestly, this all comes about because it's all the kid's fault, because he wouldn't shut up about it. And if Tim Allen just took him aside at the start and said, "Hey, don't tell anyone about this night," kind of thing.
To be fair, he did say it to him as they were walking through the park. They're like, "Let's just keep this a secret." Like,
but that was after the weeks of him in his room doing stuff.
Oh yeah,
though.
But then it came back during the custody hearing. Yeah. Apparently the judge took Charlie aside and said, like, "Okay, is there anything you want to tell me?" And Charlie just said everything. He's just like, "Don't worry, Dad. I told him how you're Santa, and we went to the North Pole, and we're going to be going back there soon." And then you just see on Tim Allen's face, they're like, "Oh, okay.
Well, I hope you like seeing me all these years, son, because you're not going to see me ever again now, I don't think."
Yeah.
So yeah, he gets. There's actually a moment where I thought he was being a real creep, because he was sort of staring at the family through the window from the outside. But I was relieved when he rang the doorbell next. I thought, oh, he's actually coming here to see them. He's not just, because I thought he just came to stare longingly through the window. I thought,
yeah, same.
This is stalkery level material here.
I was like, dude, you don't have the right to be here right now. You can be arrested. You need to leave. One scene we did skip over is he gets delivered the naughty and the nice list.
I will say I did appreciate that there was in the note with it said check it twice. I thought that was a cute joke.
Yeah. I liked how it was all delivered by FedEx, more or less.
But it was
just like
hundreds of red boxes, because it's every child in the world's name on a bunch of lists.
But then you see one of those mental changes again, where he's just walking down the street, and just by looking at a kid, he knows their name and he knows if they're naughty or nice.
Yeah, it's just like a superpower. And then he sees like an attractive woman wearing like
a Veronica, very nice.
Yeah, it's a very small skirt, and she sort of hears it and just looks at him and goes, "In your dreams, old man," and walks away.
And in your dreams, slay boy.
There you go. Yeah, it's just no much missing.
It was a very short scene, but honestly, I felt that did a lot to just be like, okay, no, here's how power works, and then we're also going to play it for a good laugh. Like,
it was one of the better jokes. I feel like it was. Like, I think if it's a problem the movie has, perhaps, is the what the good Christmas movies that balance this well do is that you have jokes that work in the earnest Christmas sense, and then you have jokes that are for the adults. And I feel like this movie, the jokes for the adults, I would say largely aren't that great, because it's just like kind of Tim Allen humor, and then the earnest jokes can work at times. The check the list twice thing I thought was a funny little Christmas joke. But I think that not either side is really exceptional. So when there is a good joke like this one, which is he kind of has an innocent little, oh, she's very nice, and then her kind of catching him out on it. It's like, oh, okay, that was an alright little joke. But I feel like there's maybe not enough of that for me to really, get on board.
I mean, for me, I think it was, like I said, I think it was just all front loaded. I think that first act featured all of the Tim Allen humor, and then the second and third act were all the Disney humor.
Yeah. So anyway, so he goes round to their house, and he's like, "I just wanted to say goodbye to the kid. Is that okay?" And the ex-wife sort of nods, and Judge Reinhold's very upset about this.
Oh, absolutely.
He's judging her for this decision. But so they walk out, and he's basically, yeah, I'm going off to deliver the presents and stuff. Like I'm all on board now.
He was told back during the first night that he had to be reporting up to the North Pole on Thanksgiving, which is tonight.
Oh wait, does that mean, because obviously the kid says, "Please take me with you," and he gives in and takes him with him, and obviously like the kid doesn't come back until during Christmas Eve. Does that mean he's been kidnapped for over a month?
Over a month. They don't do a good job of showing that in the movie, it is a full month that passes of him not being around.
Do you know, that actually does make it seem a lot worse that the kid's missing because I thought it was like the next day when they got him back.
Nope. They were having Thanksgiving dinner. He said, "Can I talk to the kid alone for a second?"
No, you're absolutely.
They come back down, and he's gone for a month.
You're absolutely right. Earlier on, he said you have to report at Thanksgiving. He did absolutely say that. I just kind of forgot it by the time we got to this part of the movie. okay. I mean, I know it's his dad, obviously, but legally, he's
still an Amber Alert. That's still going out.
Yeah, the kid's gone for a whole month. Actually, probably my biggest complaint, because obviously I think some of my things that I don't like about this, it's just, it's a kid's movie, and it's not trying to take itself seriously, and the tone's not necessarily working for me, and I won't really criticize it for that. It's just, not my taste, whatever, fine. Something I will criticize is the moment where, and I'm kind of skipping over some of the actual Christmas antics, which we'll talk about, but when they end up back at the house and Bernard, the head elf's there, and Judge Reinhold sees him and all that, and freaks out because he disappears and so on and so on. But this is the scene where first the ex-wife and then Judge Reinhold eventually just kind of like go, wait, you are really Santa Claus. And what I didn't get about that is I thought they set up the presents they never got as kids, which made them stop believing in Santa. I thought they set that up because handing them those presents on Christmas Eve was going to be what makes them go, oh shit, you really are Santa. Yeah. Instead, they just kind of accept it. I mean, Judge Reinhold at least sees someone disappear magically, so at least he's seen something kind of supernatural to at least provoke the idea. But even before that, there's a moment where he looks at him and goes, like, but your eyes... Are you? And then he sort of like goes, no, Judge. Like, yeah. But the ex-wife just like, she sees him hugging or the kid and just goes like, oh my God, you really are Santa. And I'm like, what? Yeah. What gave you that? Why do you believe this all of a sudden?
I have literally written down in my notes here, Laura and Neil suddenly get it for no reason. Yeah. Like there is absolutely nothing besides the fact that he loves his son. Like he that is it. That is literally the only thing that I could think could trigger it at all. And that has no reason to be Santa, obviously. That's just Tim Allen being a good dad. But I fully agree. If they set up that present thing early enough on, and it's easily able to happen here, where he just says, like, before I go, here you go, and he passes over the gifts.
Which he does anyway. He just does it after this moment.
Yeah, exactly. They save that moment for later. And I feel like the only reason that it was shifted for later is that they still wanted to have like a couple more scenes of Judge Reinhold like maybe not in on it completely until they finally got to that last moment. Because as soon as they get their gifts, we never see them again. They're gone. They're out of the movie. It's not a whole lot of time. It's only maybe like 5-10 minutes, but they are gone after that point. So, yeah, it's a very valid criticism.
Yeah, that just it really bugged me because everything else because I'm going to nitpick a couple of things here, and they're not really big deals. Like, so like before this scene, there's a whole thing where he's actually in the house delivering the presents, and he gets arrested because the cops are waiting for him, and they arrest him. They take him to to not prison, take him to the police station, right, and to lock up. And we get this whole like gimmicky joke thing set up where there's this like elite team of elves who have jetpacks who fly to break Santa out, and it feels like such a Disney. We want this little fun segment where Charlie gets to team up with some elves who are really just other kids, but they're all like badass and have jetpacks, and they make a cop spill his coffee because they're flying over his head and stuff. Right.
The fact that they specifically have one of them say like, "We're elves with attitude." I'm like, all right, 90s, you can stop whenever you feel like.
He says that. He also says when he's on the roof, because Charlie's left up on the roof when Tim Allen gets arrested, they arrive on the roof and they sort of explain briefly what they're there, but let's go save Santa. He says I don't know what Charlie asked necessarily. He just turns to him and goes, "We've found that it's much quicker if you fly." And I'm like, what was that line?
Yeah, also just plot hole wise, maybe not plot hole, but something that bothered me. So they know that Scott Calvin believes he is Santa. And he is going through the whole rigmarole. Like, he is delivering presents in this house. He's doing the whole thing. And they don't think, hey, maybe we should check to see if he left the child on the roof. Because he like, A, the reindeer disappear, which is a literal plot hole. Like, they're just gone. But B, like, you would think the police would think, oh, hey, we've got him. We have him now. Where's the kid? At no point do they ever seem to care about, like, where's the kid, right up until the moment where the kid shows up in the police station. They're like, oh, hey, it's you. Cool. We were kind of looking for you.
Yeah, and then they use tinsel to break him out of the jail cell.
Yes.
Because they can cut through solid metal, because lol, whatever. But anyway, so the point I was getting at, though, that I was, to bring all this stuff in, is that, so it's nighttime. He started delivering presents to children who are asleep, and he's doing it in the US. He's not doing it on the other side of the planet because it's dark there first. He's doing it in the US because he came to their house. He came to the ex-wife's house.
Of course.
He's arrested. He spends... Let's even be generous to say it's only half an hour. He spends half an hour in the jail cell. Then the elves come and they get him out. He goes back to the house. All that stuff. When he's being arrested, he comes out... There's like parents and kids like standing watching saying, no, don't take Santa away. I'm like, why is there kids out in the street as if it's still like 8 p.m. when he's already going around delivering things?
Time continuum.
Like, he literally went to the girl who was mean to before, and there's a little payoff where she's replaced the milk with soy milk because he said he was lactose intolerant.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, that's kind of sweet, whatever. But then there's just these random kids out in the street, like, when he's being arrested. And then again, at the end, when he comes out of the house to leave finally to go and deliver the rest of the presents, there's people, there's kids.
Okay, like, for the second one, they had sirens blaring pulling up to this house.
Sure.
So I'm thinking that people were just like, what the hell's going on at the Calvin house? As for the first one, I mean, there's nothing to say what time it actually was. Theoretically, it should be like, Santa comes after all the kids are asleep, so it should be after that, but I'm going to go ahead and just lay out that they're Jewish, and we can move on.
Then why are they saying, don't take Santa away?
Yeah, Santa's still cool.
Nah, they should be like, nah, screw him. He's the representation of the enemy. They should be heckling him.
That's how the Jewish faith is represented, by breaking down mall Santa displays.
They should be throwing like cans of soup at his head and stuff. Like
that's the sequel. That's where it happens.
It doesn't really matter. But it was like what time anything takes place in this last like 15 minutes of the movie was just all over the place, bro. This doesn't make any sense because it's...
See, that's not even the part that bothered me the most, is the fact that he was stuck in this place for like, half an hour minimum. The part that really bothered me was the fact that like half an hour passes after he leaves, and Charlie, it's revealed that he was given a snow globe way earlier in the movie, and that's like his proof. That's his thing that he keeps coming back to, of like, no, this night actually happened. It turns out that if he shakes it, it basically gives a little notification to Santa saying that Charlie wants you to come back and visit. And so not only was he already behind on time by half an hour, but then Charlie, before the night is over, shakes it again and is like, I need to see you, Dad. So he then has to stop whatever he's doing. He says he was on his way to Cleveland, so he hasn't made a lot of distance here. To then come back and visit as a kid again and be like, hey, kind of the one night a year I have to work. Could we maybe not shake it right now?
Yeah, it's only been 10 minutes. And then he's like, can I go, please? And he's like, it's up to your mom. And the mom's like, all right, but not over any oceans. And like, I get that it's this heartfelt family film, but can I just say, now that I've realized that he was gone for a month, like, it doesn't matter what the reason was. It doesn't matter if they now know the Santa Claus thing is real. He still took the child with no knowledge of where he went for a month.
Yeah.
The context isn't that important at this point. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, there's consequences to that. And at the very least, like, even if there's no legal consequences, like, the mother should still be pissed. It doesn't matter if he's really Santa Claus.
Okay, well, let me put this out for context.
Okay.
Magic and whimsy.
I hate it.
Okay, fair enough.
I hate magic. I hate whimsy.
I could tell you don't even know about the Wienermobile.
That doesn't sound like whimsy. That sounds like To Catch a Predator.
I mean, I'm sure at some point, but... Anyway, yes.
I don't know what more to add to that. I just... The whole... like, there's so many like things here that don't track. Like, he should be in prison for kidnapping a child. And he technically was for a bit, and the elves break him out, and it's like...
Yeah, no, they're like 100%. They're currently right now on Disney Plus. They're doing clauses, which is, I guess, how they're going to wrap up Tim Allen's whole
He's going to pass the torch to someone new.
Right. He can't go back and be Scott Calvin again. Like, that man is wanted not only for child abduction, but for also breaking out of prison. Like, these are not crimes that just go away.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it, like, he's almost caught a few. I mean, I assume he gets better at it, but that first night he does it, the girl wakes up and sees him, the dog, like, almost gets him, he sets off the alarm. Like, if anyone sees him and, like, recognizes him, like, he's also going to be wanted for breaking and entering.
I mean, isn't that just the thing that, like, again, if you're trying to view this movie logically, like, so many people nowadays have, like, Nests and, like, Alexas and whatnot. Like, surely that would just have to be something that gets covered of, here's how Santa manages to not get caught on our home surveillance network.
Oh, it would just be one line of dialogue. It'd be like, no, he's kind of like, he's physically there, but as far as cameras and sensors go, he's more like a ghost. It doesn't set anything off.
Santa is a vampire,
yes,
is what you're saying.
Kind of, yes. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, like if you logically approach anything in this movie, it not only falls apart, but yes, he's actively doing criminal things, like kidnapping a child for a month, even though the kid wanted to go. I mean, the kid wasn't taken under duress, but that doesn't make it okay.
I mean, if I went up to a kid and said, hey, want to go to Disney World, I'm still kidnapping the kid.
Yes. Even if you never mistreat him, even if you treat him like a little prince the entire time, you still kidnapped.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing. I don't think this movie ever meant to be viewed logically.
No.
I mean, they provided those little things of like, oh, here's how Santa managed to do this. Not to give any sort of logical base to it, but just to be like, here's this quirky little reason we came up with. The role of Santa itself, not even like out of tradition, but the role of Santa itself craves milk and cookies.
Yes.
Like, that's just the little things that they tossed in, not to give a logical reason as to like how this movie can function. It's just basically like, here's all the tropes you know about Santa. We're going to just kind of explain a couple of them.
Yeah, I think, I guess, like, some people might be thinking, well, we're being too nitpicky and talking about all these logical things and whatever. To me, that's just the fun of talking about the movie for the most part.
Oh, yeah, but for sure. I do. Okay, I promised I would mention this bit. Sorry to interrupt. I had to mention this bit.
Okay.
There's a point where, so I think Neil says, like, you know what? One day you're going to make a really good psychiatrist. And Charlie just looks up and he's like, nah, I think I'm going to go in the family business. Which immediately, both me and my girlfriend were like, I am going to kill my father and take his place as head of this operation. I will sit on his throne in his blood.
Actually, this has become a bit of a running segment. What does she think of the movie, actually, now that you've brought her up?
She liked it a lot more than any of the Dirty Harry films.
I mean, I would argue it's better than certainly the last 3 Dirty Harry movies, probably.
Yeah, that's fair.
Certainly if it was aiming to be anyway, it's better than those. But Dirty Harry 1, no, come on, no, much better than this. Come on now. No, what I was going to get to is that I think there's something to be said that there's other Christmas movies or movies that are, more aimed at families or more, less serious, that I don't really necessarily think about or care about the logical problems if you stop and think about it, because I'm enjoying them more and I'm just wrapped up in what the story it's telling me is. I think there's something to be said here that I was thinking and focusing on a lot of these details as I was watching it because I wasn't that into it. So I was starting to like look at the other details and be like, this doesn't quite work because of this, and that doesn't quite work because of that, and so on.
Yeah, if it's not hitting your threshold for disbelief, suspension of disbelief, then yeah, I can imagine those logical problems would be something that you focus on a lot more. So yeah, fully reasonable.
And not that they were upsetting me or anything like that. It was just a case of this is something to focus on because the plot's only engaging me so much. Like I'm right. It's only so entertaining. So now I'm looking for other things to like think about and whatnot. So I think there's something to be said for that, which is maybe just to say it is a family film that is maybe just lacking that spark to be special or something more that can appeal to everyone, and instead is just an okay family film as opposed to going above and beyond where it becomes something like I don't know. I
mean, the benchmark, at least stateside, I feel like is Christmas Story, where it just taps into that nostalgia wave.
Yeah, I feel like that movie does a really good job, though. I mean, I've only seen it the once because it's not a big movie for kids here. It doesn't really play that much. I went out of my way to see it, like, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. And I think what that movie does really well is that it takes the thing that every kid actually feels at Christmas, which is the excitement over that present you want, and it kind of makes the movie about that. So it's very relatable. Something like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, it's about how family get together at Christmas and the awkwardness and all the weird bits and try to have the nice Christmas even though you don't like a lot of the people you're having to see. It captures that part of Christmas. Home Alone has this kind of fantasy element to it, and kind of does like a kid Die Hard sort of approach, which appeals to kids. But it makes
specifically you.
But it makes the kid kind of like you want to root for him, and he's outwitting the bad guys who are very good, funny actors, and it makes them the villains. Whereas here you've got this kid who is really earnest and really like childish and just believes in the things, and he's really excited about Christmas. And you've got the adult having the heartwarming story. Maybe it's just a taste thing, but part of me, I think the reason why Home Alone appeals to me way much more than this does is that it's the kid versus the bad adults. And there's something more, I don't know, to that for me, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this movie didn't really have any conflict outside of Tim Allen's character accepting his role. That was really and even then we've said multiple times how that kind of just flipped like a switch. That wasn't a slow, gradual overcoming. Yeah. That was I'm Santa now.
Well, that and the threat of the custody and all that.
Yeah, but even then, that was very much a third act thing. That wasn't something that was established at the end of the first act as like, oh, here's the thing that he has to watch out for. It's a very much no, in the third act, he loses custody because we need to have Santa be sad.
Which is probably why the movie feels so segmented, is that it doesn't really feel like it has one arc that goes the whole way through. It's more like, a series of different things that happen that just kind of sit together. Whereas, I'm not saying Home Alone's high art, but if it's the one I'm going to compare it to, is that the what I consider probably the best kids' Christmas movie, is that movie, it does have this clear arc for Kevin where he doesn't want his family around. He thinks he wishes them away. He doesn't really, obviously, but he thinks that. And then by the end, he wants them back. He realizes what living without them actually means. And he's put in a position where he's at risk because he's not got them around, on top of just the loneliness. And ultimately, because he makes some good choices, it's actually like, people don't tend to love Home Alone 2 as much. I actually think it's just as good as the first one. And part of the reason why I like it so much is because at the end of the movie, he makes the choice to he doesn't have to actually take on Marvin thingy again. He could just let that go and just stay away from them, but he chooses to interact with them and sort of do his thing again. He's like, no, I'm going to trap them and stop them because they're stealing from a store that's going to give money to a children's hospital right for Christmas. So he's making this choice out of a selfish reason to he's basically like, you know what, I learned to be this kid superhero in the last movie. I'm actually going to choose to be that for other people. He does this selfless act, and it's actually kind of a sweet story. And it's kind of sweet in the first one because he's defending his house because that's his family's house, because that's this is his brother's room and his mother's and father's things, and he wants to protect it because it means something to him because it's them. There's kind of a nice heart to the story on top of all the antics of, oh, he's going to set up traps that are kind of like cartoony, and oh, he's going to set someone on fire, lol, that's actually quite dangerous if you did that in real life. You can sit and poke holes at a lot of the things in that if you want to, but I think the through line of what the story is far more concrete and solid in terms of what it's doing.
The through line in this one is far closer to just keeping the wonder of childhood, imagination alive, but it's an issue because the wonder of childhood and keeping that alive and whatnot, we've seen is in the terms of this movie, the objective truth. Yeah. It's less so of keeping it alive as much as it is of just not having them believe this lie that's been propagated throughout society. But it never explores it that way. It always explores it in terms of Santa isn't real, except for the fact that as an audience, we know he's real.
It would almost be more interesting because, at one point Bernard says, oh, adults can't believe, they always grow out of believing in Santa at a certain point because adults can't. And because there's certain things that are there's when you're younger, you can hear higher pitched noises, and there's certain whistles and things that only people under 18 can hear. And it's not a hard cut off, it's obviously maybe a few years of a sort of crossover period, but Because I remember kids using them in the school and the teacher couldn't hear them, and like all the kids could.
Ringtone, yeah.
But like it kind of explained it like that, and I almost think it'd be more interesting if like it was impossible to prove to the other adults. Obviously, Tim Allen knows because he's now becoming Santa, so he has to know. But all of the other adults can never know. So it would almost be more interesting for him to work around that like caveat. But no, he just they get convinced.
Yeah, again, I feel like there may have been a draft of the script somewhere that explored some of these a bit deeper, different aspects of the thing. I think that obviously if they wanted it to be that, how do we make it so that the parents don't press charges against Scott by the end of the movie? And the answer is they believe he's Santa. So clearly it's not a thing of adults can't believe. It's just a thing of somehow they fool themselves into believing someone else is putting presents under the tree, or they themselves are doing it. Again, it's not something that's ever explored. You're never supposed to think that deeply into it. You're just supposed to take what's in front of you and say, yep, that's how the world works.
It's almost a shame, because you could almost do like a slightly more grown-up version. It's not like super adult, but if the whole like gimmick of the movie is like, okay, we're going to actually try and make all of the Christmas like mythology work and try and explain it all, and that's kind of the point, is like, how do you make it fit into the real world? And the movie does that to a point, but it doesn't kind of
I mean, it then becomes the issue of like, okay, but then like at a certain point it stops being a movie with a through line and it just starts being a thesis statement.
Oh sure, yeah. Well, like I say, like I'd have to sit down and actually like think of what the story would be for that. But I do think it would maybe be interesting, because like some of the more interesting concepts, like adults just can't believe in it, right? It just goes away over time. Like that's a really interesting thing to explore, and have to work around that in your story. I suppose what would maybe be the ending would just be that Scott just disappears, and it's like a sort of mystery to all the adults. I mean, his kid would know where he went. That he's become Santa Claus and he's in the North Pole or whatever, but not to the adults of the world. It's just like he disappeared, but the kid secretly knows. The kid still believes in his father, and maybe there you could actually have a something of a decent dramatic subtext. This idea that it could be a metaphor for when someone dies, but the kid just believes in the spirit of their lost loved one enough that they kind of keep it alive, and but all the adults let them go. Like you could actually do something with that subtext and sort of make it about something. Because I don't know if this is this. I don't even know if this has subtext, to be honest. I don't think.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that you aren't supposed to analyze this movie any deeper than what is directly presented to you.
Yes.
Anything that they want you to think about, they point out. They're like, hey, we want you to think about how does he get into houses without chimneys, but they don't want you to think about stuff like, okay, well, how does he get into houses without radiators? Like, they only show you as deep as they want you to think the whole way through.
Yeah. Which is why I brought up Home Alone, because while it's not a super deep movie by any means, there is a little bit of like craft to the script in that. Okay, this is the heart of why he's defending the house. It's not just about defending himself. It's the house is like his family's house. There's like a it fits into the theme of the movie, and it's not like a super in-depth theme. It's not we're not talking about a Stanley Kubrick movie here, but it's got a little bit of something in the craft of the script just to give it a little bit of structure and momentum and situational context and motivation for the characters that goes beyond just the basic thing is happening, X character has to react to thing happening.
Right.
It goes just a little bit beyond that and just makes it a bit more filler as a result. Whereas here, I find it to be just a little more shallow, I guess.
Yeah.
Which probably wouldn't matter that much if I liked Tim Allen's delivery of comedy a bit more. But yeah, that's what it is. So, oh well. Is there anything else you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, anything else I really have to say goes into the final thoughts and the scoring and whatnot. I do just want to add on that while I think this movie is, I don't want to say dated, because it's not. It doesn't do anything that's particularly like this could only exist in the 90s sort of thing. There is just a certain tone to it, a certain something that sets this, like we said, we felt like it was late 90s. It ended up being more mid-early 90s, but it is something that you just feel it's around that period. Maybe it's because we know the actors, we know their ages, we know when they were at their most popular. But it isn't something like, for instance, A Christmas Story, where it is truly evergreen. Like, yes, it was set in the 50s, filmed in like the 80s, but like that movie is just an eternal piece, you know?
Yeah, but that kind of is what makes it. The fact that it was a period piece when it came out does make it kind of timeless, because it's like, oh no, this was always a look back at the past, so, and that's always going to be true. Like, it's never going to not be an accurate feeling to what the movie is. It's the same way with it's funny I just mentioned Kubrick, but 2001 has a lot of classical music in it, and despite the fact that we've long passed 2001 a year, right, we're long past that date, all right, and we don't have the space travel that movie prophesies, and some of the technology in the movie looks very dated because it's, you know, classic buttons and things like that. It oddly still feels kind of timeless, and part of that is because the music it was using was already so old that it just kind of feels like, oh, that just makes it feel like it was already like this timeless thing.
Right.
So same thing here with like setting Christmas Story in the past. I think this movie looks like a 90s movie. You know, it has that kind of look and feel to it. Obviously, like, there's certain technology things that you always kind of notice. The one thing I noticed early on is that Tim Allen has a car phone, and I thought,
oh, that's right.
And I was thinking, I was like, oh, it's kind of funny how these days you would just, you know, you just pull out his iPhone or whatever and have this call, but it just, you know, because it feels like smartphones are a thing that like are relatively recent, but they feel like they're here to stay, and they've not really changed in design much in the last decade. They still look kind of similar, you know, they're just a rectangle and whatever.
Like you have the car phone era, but then like even splitting it up past that, like once cell phones started coming out, you can pin down exactly where someone's pulling out like the flip phone or the slide phone. It's only once we get to the brick that it's like, okay, now we know where we're at.
Yeah, and also the little Nokia phone. There's the end of the 90s, start of the 2000s period that I can just like, it's like, I feel like because we've kind of settled on a design now that seems to be sticking for a good amount of time, there is anything from like the early 90s or the late 80s maybe even to like about 2010, you can sort of pinpoint within a few years based on the type of phone they've got. Like,
and I mean, that is just the risk it runs into. Like, if you're going to use, like, if you got to 2010 and you started using iPhones in your productions, you're just running that risk that another design's going to come along and replace it. They were like, car phones, they're here to stay. And then, whoops, they weren't.
Yeah, this isn't a critique, it's just an observation that's interesting. I thought about it a little bit as you had it, because I was like, I'm sure at the time, because you know, car phones existed, but I don't think most people had them. This was like you know, only certain types of people did. Whereas, so I'm sure it was like, oh, fancy, you know, rich, upper middle class dudes got a car phone. Like, that may have been the attitude of people seeing the movie. Not the kids, obviously, but the adults maybe thought that. But nowadays, you know, and so just imagine the future of 2022 where everyone's got a phone in their pocket and we can record video on it and all these other crazy things.
Wow.
I know. We're in the future, David. It's exciting.
I wish I brought the lotto numbers with me.
Oh dear. Yeah. I think it's especially notable for like this time period because we were kids at this time period, you know.
Yeah. It is definitely like, I mean, I was literally born the year before this movie came out, so it is definitely a thing of like, I maybe can't, you were probably the exact same age as the young child actor, weren't you?
No, I was 5. He's a bit older than that, is he not?
He's close. He's around that. I'm not going to say exactly, but
I'll look up the actor and tell you what age he was at the time.
But yeah, no, it is. There is definitely because, you know, people who grew up in the 50s are nostalgic to the 50s, 60s, 60s. For us, there's that early to mid 90s period that just kind of is just like, oh yeah.
He was 8 when the movie came out.
Okay, I feel like that was written for a slightly younger kid. Then he was
acting younger, but that's not irregular for a movie.
Fair enough.
Just so that they're easy to control more than anything else. Yeah, because I feel like once you go back into the 80s, because I was born in 89, so once you go back into the 80s, it feels like, oh, anything before I was born feels like just pre-birth, so it feels older and not in a bad way. Like I love the 80s as a decade for movies, but but once you're starting to the era of when I was alive and I vaguely remember things, I feel the difference in everything from then, you know?
Sure.
So I notice it especially in a movie like this where I'm like, okay, I remember vaguely this time period, so it's just kind of wild how much things have changed in my lifespan. So, but yeah, that's not really about the movie per se. It's just a passing thought.
Wild ramblings here that we have.
So yes, I guess we shall rate the movie then. What you got, David?
Right. Okay, so out of 10, just judging the movie on its own merits, I really struggle between a 6.5 and a 7. I'm definitely in there. And I think I came into this review more at a 7, just because it was, it's such a genuine sort of feeling that you're left with in the end. It's not a manufactured like, oh, this is, the spirit of Christmas is actually family, as we've shown you through these focus tested scenes. It's like, no, it felt like a genuine sort of bond between him and his son, a genuine feeling of wanting to keep the magic of childhood alive. I think it did well on that. But I mean, over the course of it, you remember more of like the first act, you remember more of how that kind of faltered into humor and didn't quite, there was no real through line to it. It was just kind of a wishy-washy, like, all right, we're gonna have this one part followed by this next part followed by this next part. And with all that in mind, I think I am going to bring it down to the 6.5, where I do still really praise it for its genuineness. It may not be an all-timer when it comes to Christmas movies. It's not going to be on everybody's must-watch list, but it is definitely something that there's a reason that it got 2 sequels. There's a reason that it has a series following up after it, besides the merciless exploitation of Hollywood intellectual properties. But
Disney especially on that
yes,
front.
Disney doubly so. But yeah, it is, there is something to it that does just feel like a good time. And so taking apart all the other minor flaws it has down to a 6.5, I think is very, it's like I said, it's right on that border. It's almost at a 7.
Okay. I can't really fault what you're saying so much, other than just I don't necessarily feel the feeling as much, and it just feels a bit lesser to me than other Christmas movies that I like more. And I don't know if part of that's the Tim Allen effect, part of that's maybe the whole like the father trying to keep the magic of Christmas alive in his child. Like, I kind of like that idea as like the backbone of what the story is. I just don't know if I necessarily feel it. And I think it goes back to something you said earlier, where the truth of Christmas all being real is just objectively a fact. And I think that almost like hurts any kind of like sweetness the message can have. Whereas if it was still like up in the air, or if it was like, no, by the end of the movie, the kid on some level has to accept that it's not real, but he can choose to have the magic anyway, or something, something like that. I could have maybe... I guess I wanted, or I would want something just a little more poignant out of it, which obviously is not really what they're going for, but I don't know, it just doesn't quite click the same level for me. That said, though, I don't think it's like particularly badly made. I do think there's some fun moments here or there. So I'm not going to go too much lower. I'm going to give it a straight 6, which is just kind of it's over the line. I don't think it's like a must Christmas watch by any means, but I can't necessarily sit and just shit on it. I think if you want to get into it, it's an easy enough watch, and there's the odd smart little joke here or there. But I'll be the weirdo that will say, if it's between this and Jingle All the Way from a couple of years later, I'll take Jingle All the Way every time.
Fair enough. Very different movies, but
very different. I mean, I was an Arnold fan growing up, which obviously helps that. But
for sure.
I don't know. Again, Joe, I think it is. I think because Christmas is actually a very commercial thing, I think I appreciate when a movie kind of like a Christmas Story, it's about the kid wanting the present. So the magic's there, but in reality, he wants a present the parents have to buy for him, right? And Jingle All the Way, it's like, yeah, like the kid wants this present, but the joke is that it's hard to get because it's a wanted toy. So the movie premise is Arnold running around trying to get it, and there's comedy ensues. And obviously, it's not a great movie by any means, but I have a lot of nostalgia for it, right?
That's fair.
But I think what appeals to me about that is that there's some realism in it, because it's like, no, it is about a toy. It's about a kid wanting a toy, and that's what Christmas is to a lot of kids.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I don't know.
There's that part that really hits.
Yeah, I relate more a bit to it, I guess, than anything else. So, yeah. Whereas the belief in Santa, I never felt sad when I stopped believing in Santa. You know, it was like, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that it's, unless it's like exposed to you before you're ready, when you just kind of grow out of it, you just grow out of it. It just happens. Yeah. You don't even notice it happening.
Yeah, I can't even tell you what age I was, but it wasn't a big deal. So,
nah.
But certainly I watched this movie when I was probably like 7 or something like that, 6 or 7.
Yeah, I guess what it was for me is that I remember very explicitly one year I had already stopped believing in Santa. I was at that age. It just gradually happened. But my sister, it was my brother. He was young enough that he was still in that kind of age. I didn't know for sure if he believed, but he was still in that age. And he was looking for something. I can't even remember what, around Christmas time. And I knew that whatever it was in our parents' closet. So me and him went over to the closet, opened it up, and inside were a bunch of presents. And immediately I like shielded his eyes and like shuffled him out of the room, because if any of that stuff were to come from Santa, I didn't want that to be the thing that ruined it, you know?
What a wonderful sibling you are, David.
I am.
Part of me thought that was building up to a story where you intentionally like revealed it.
Yep.
To be a dick.
You see that? You see that over there? Really notice that action figure. That's coming from Santa, and yet it's already here.
A lot of air quotes in the David household that year. Yeah. Towards Christmas. Santa.
I mean, it also didn't help that, like, I again, once I knew Santa wasn't a thing, I was like, you know, Santa's handwriting looks a lot like my mom's. It's kind of weird.
Oh dear. Yeah, I don't know. So, decent Christmas movie, but I don't think it's one that, even as a kid, I don't think I liked it anywhere near as much as like the handful that I loved watching every year. Yeah. So.
And I also think that it is the thing of what you grow up on. Like, Christmas is a very nostalgic time period. Mm-hmm. It is very much like the things you grow up on are the things you're going to continue. I think that people who grew up on this movie probably have a much higher opinion of it than people like you or me who only saw it like once or twice or not even at all.
Yeah. I mean, I did see it a few times, so I mean, like, I could have had nostalgia for this, but it just didn't click with me, I don't think, as much as other movies. So, yeah, it is what it is, and yeah, we'll see how the sequels fare, but, you know.
Got to get our secondary rating still.
We do, yes. So this is the one where we have to agree on a rating by the end. Yes. So, does it make the cut, David?
So, in terms of if I was collecting the Santa Claus movies, do I think the first Santa Claus would be in there? And I mean, yeah, I gotta say it pretty easily makes the cut. I think that it's worth having in the collection of, I don't want to say, I think that it is worth having for just in a general Christmas collection as well. In a general movie collection, probably not. But in a Christmas collection, yes. In a specifically like this trilogy of films, I can't see any reason why this wouldn't be a part of it. So yeah, I gotta say, first one makes the cut.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the first movie, I think you're less thinking about it in the context of the franchise itself, just because, well, it's the first one. Like, it almost is an irrelevant question for that, but like, just is it worth having on its own? I like that logic though of like just in general or just as part of like a Christmas set of films, because
that's the thing is the holiday films are so like you're not going to get high art from a holiday film 95% of the time. So it's hard to say in a general collection is it worth having, but Christmas wise I do think so.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit more to cutting it close in terms of value. I'm willing to concede and just say it makes the cut though.
Okay.
For the joint rating. I actually do wonder if, like, because of the focus of this about being keeping the magic alive for the kid, I do wonder if the movie actually works better for parents than non-parents, or even kids for that matter.
Possibly.
Because that's a desire that parents usually have for their kids, so maybe they relate to that part of the movie a lot more than anyone else does. I don't know.
Maybe I have a secret kid out there somewhere that I don't know about, and this is just my instincts taking over. I don't think so, though.
I doubt it. I doubt it. So, so we'll say making the cut, but you know, I wouldn't. You know, it's just not. You know, it's there.
It's on the border. It's not high art, but it is still worth having around.
All right. Well, we'll see how the search for Mrs. Claus goes.
Yes.
In part 2, next time. But it's also worth mentioning the bonus episode on Patreon this month. I'm not sure when it's going up at the time of recording, but it will be the other Tim Allen Christmas movie, which is Christmas with the Cranks. So look forward to that, patrons.
Oh boy.
That's one of those movies where we're just going to be watching a terrible movie and then ripping it to shreds in the review. So if that sounds like fun, then
I'm sure that we can find a little bit of Christmas joy in it. The tiniest iota. Maybe.
I don't know. Like, I wanted to like it because Jamie Lee Curtis is in it, but I just, you know, and Dan Aykroyd's in it even as well, if I remember right. So, you know, we'll see. But that's the Patreon exclusive. You can get that, of course, by supporting us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. There's a bonus episode every month. And you also get bonuses for the other shows that you get in Mail Fuzz Movies, such as a bonus Streams After Midnight, a bonus Atomic Cinema Experiment episode. Those are our horror and sci-fi movie podcasts, respectively. So if you want to support all the content, you can go over there and do that. That's the best way of doing it and getting some extras. If you want to do a one-time kind of sort of tip, you can do that on YouTube with the super thanks button. And of course, you can support us for completely free by liking, subscribing, dinging the bell for notifications, sharing us out on social media. We're at Streams Midnight on Twitter, which is our general Twitter for all Mail Fuzz movies. So make sure you go and do all those things. And of course, you can rate the podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from with a nice 5-star review or whatever the scale is on your service. But all those things do help us out a lot. So please do them.
In the spirit of Christmas.
Yes, in the spirit of Christmas. And we'll see you next time for Santa Claus 2. And don't think too hard. Why is there no Christmas tree behind Peter right now? And why is there a Christmas tree behind Peter in the next batch of movies? Don't worry about it. Just roll with it.
Time continuum.
Time continuum, yes. Timey-wimey, rubber banding, black holes, all that stuff. Just go with it. But there you go. That is the Santa Claus episode of The Collector's Cut. Thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. And do I have a nice jolly outro for this episode?
I doubt it.
I just, Judge Reinhold was in Gremlins. That's another Christmassy movie.
Is that an outro?
That's not an outro. I don't know. I wanted to make a pun with his name being Judge.
Okay, I could see that.
Yes. Hopefully you enjoyed the review where we Judge Reinholded this film.
Merry Christmas.